You are now listening to the House by the Video Store podcast.
There's no more room in hell. The dead will walk here.
We have such sights to show you.
I kick ass for the Lord.
Great Scott! Give away!
Welcome to the House by Video Store podcast. I'm your host, William, and joining me will be Sean.
Hello.
And we'll be discussing the 2003 film from Rob Zombie, House of a Thousand Corpses, a movie I think we've almost covered a few times, but then never actually ended up doing it. But since it will be Halloween, or close to Halloween when you're listening to this, we figured we'd cover a movie that was set on Halloween, and something, because we've covered most of the big franchise films, and this, you know, aside from like the later sequels to like
Halloween.
I think we covered all the Halloween series.
Yeah,
at some point.
but not the individuals.
Like on the Friday the 13th, we've covered through part 6. Friday or Nightmare on Elm Street, we've covered through part 3. So we have some of those later sequels we could have talked about, or something like the sequels to Hellraiser. But I mean, those to me, those kind of go off a cliff pretty quickly after part 2. But you know, there's a lot of those franchise sequels that are kind of the lesser than. So like, what's something we haven't talked about that's set on Halloween that would be of interest to people? It's like, oh, we haven't talked about House of a Thousand Corpses. We talked about Devil's Rejects before, which
I mean, he loves setting films on Halloween.
Yeah.
Between the Halloween remakes, this, and then 31.
Yeah.
Like,
and yeah, you know, like we'll get more into it in the review, but he must, like, I think when we watched for this podcast, we reviewed Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. I was like, oh, I hadn't watched this in a while. This is Rob Zombie's entire career encapsulated in one film. And then rewatching House of a Thousand Corpses is like, absolutely, that is the movie that mostly inspired him. Despite having Bill Moseley, and, you know, stylistically, it was just like, that is his career. But, yeah, so we talked about House of a Thousand Corpses, but before that, we'll talk about some recent news briefly, and then the things we've been watching. And on news, just to kind of bring it back to Rob Zombie, there's news coming out that he's going to be bringing back another film with the Firefly clan, so the family from House of a Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects, and it's seeming like it would maybe be a prequel because, you know, spoiler alert, if you've seen Devil's Rejects, some of those characters aren't alive to reprise at this point. So the storyline is kind of up in the air, but I know people are excited that he's going back to the series.
I've seen other people, too, kind of go at him for, I guess, going back to the well. You know, like, but this was on like I guess an article post from a non-horror website. It was a lot of, you know, just general fans, and they were critical, like, hey, why don't you like try to think of something more original instead of like going back and doing this, which, you know, I'm up for it. I'm more excited for this than I have been a lot of his recent output, you know, the films that have came out, just because Devil's Rejects is my favorite Rob Zombie film.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think too, part of the issue is you watch. I think with him, he made, you know, House of a Thousand Corpses, Devil's Rejects, and then he did like the Halloween remake, and then the sequel, and then he did something Lords of Salem, which was an original property that didn't do very well and wasn't very well liked. I mean, some people do talk about it now, but it didn't make much money, and it wasn't like a big thing that anybody really talked about in the general film world. So I think he kind of decided, like, well, screw it. I don't want to make this original thing that nobody's going to watch. Yeah. So then he did something like 31 that, even though it was a new story, was very much the same type of thing he had already done. So to me, like, going back to the well...
It's part of kind of maybe survival for continuing to work as a filmmaker, possibly. You know?
Yeah,
kind of because his cachet is not as high as it was, you know, around, 2008, whenever the 2007, when the Halloween remake came out.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think part of it, too, to me, it kind of feels like when, like a musical artist goes solo, and then they have a couple of albums that don't do too well. Yeah. And then they go back to the band and do a reunion tour and do all the greatest hits again. So it kind of feels like that. The big difference is comparing something like, you know, another movie with the Firefly clan to 31 is, regardless of how bad it's written and regardless of how poorly it's edited or directed, like, Bill Moseley is still entertaining. So I think somebody like him can shine through material that's not great. because like
It's incredible that he hasn't kind of broken through and just even been like, even a second or third lackey in a big budget hero, superhero film, or not even like action film. Like he could easily been the villain in like many, many big action series, I think.
Yeah.
Like I think he is so good. And it's weird that he's like almost this like hidden little treasure.
being combined to genre stuff.
Yeah. Like I could easily seen him been like, like maybe not Die Hard is the right analogy, but some like he would have been awesome in Con Air.
Well, I was gonna say, like, it's just like when you start talking about him being like a big star, it's like in my head, there's not a lot that separates him ability wise from who is in Con Air.
There was Nick Cage, John Malkovich.
John
Okay,
Malkovich.
John Malkovich is pretty
So I was going to say Bill Moseley, like in terms of things I've seen him do, it doesn't seem like he's that different from Malkovich.
Yeah.
And I think it's just that Malkovich had he's great actor, but then also got a number of good projects.
Mm-hmm.
So you had stuff like Con Air, which is like a kind of kitschy throwaway 90s action film, but then you also did the more experimental stuff like being John Malkovich in different movies like that. And so Bill Moseley, it is surprising that he's been kind of confined to the kind of genre world.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe he turned down bigger projects. I'm not sure.
I don't know. I don't think he's gotten his due though. I mean, I saw him talk this year at Fright Night too, or Days of the Dead. We did not go to Fright Night. But I always like listening to him talk too, as far as in interviews or anything too, because he's like highly intelligent.
Yeah.
He seems to kind of have he has like good judgment. He's, you know what I mean? He seems like he could pick the right roles, and you can't always just make up a role for yourself if you're not a writer or whatever. So maybe he does pick some roles that are just purely work, but he seems like he is able to elevate all of this stuff because he thinks critically about his characters.
Yeah.
And he really like tries to put the work into it and not just read the lines and get a paycheck, you know? Like I mean, who knows? He could pick up later in his career, but I mean, we were talking about local films and like getting like a certain film was like trying to find different actors and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, if I did one, Bill Moseley would be the guy that I would go after because he's, again, he's not appearing in Mission Impossible or anything like that.
Yeah.
But if I had any money at all, like I think he could elevate again any film he was in based on the writing or anything at all.
Yeah.
He's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, so if there's more news on what exactly that movie's going to be, I mean, being a prequel, because like Devil's Rejects was from 2000. Well, like House of 1,000 Corpses, I think was like shot and finished in 2000, didn't come out till 2003. And then Devil's Rejects was a few years after that. So you're talking about coming back to these characters at least 10 years later. I mean, none of the actors involved look younger 10 years later.
I mean, Sid Haig, we've seen him past couple of years at Days of the Dead.
Yeah.
And, he's getting up there in age. Like, it's hard for him to kind of walk quickly around.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, he's not a fast mover.
He's not, in his 30s or 40s.
No.
So, and it's not even something like Wet Hot American Summer where I guess you could just do that where you have like the same actors play much younger characters or versions of themselves.
Yeah. And they could also just it could just be like, hey, here's another Firefly Clan story.
Yeah.
And even though they died at the end of Devil Rejects, this is almost just like a comic book anthology series or something. You know what I mean? Like a what if. Like, okay, here's just another story set with them. Yeah, they're older, but we're not going to worry about the timeline because really, Devil's Rejects kind of did that with House of 1,000 Corpses. You know what I mean? Like, you really don't need to see that film. It barely, they kind of changed a lot of things.
Well, it leaves out some characters.
Yes, like it's very much just almost like this Campfire Tales version. So it's like they could do that also and just tell another story. And I think that might be a cool approach. So they wouldn't be too chained to, again, the previous sequel and stuff, which is what tons of films are doing now. Like the Halloween sequel. I was watching a thing with James Cameron and Tim Miller, director of Deadpool, who is doing the new Terminator, and they're talking like, okay, yeah, we're just going to pretend 1 and 2 happened. Like that's a huge thing in cinema right now. It's just to kind of
forgetting that sequels happen.
And honestly, I think that's probably better than trying to shoehorn so much mythology that is in so many of these series now. Like like just make a good film. People like the characters. If you're going to have the same actors in that, like just make a good movie. It's fine. It's all fantasy anyway.
If you're going to make a Halloween film with Michael Myers, it requires you to watch it like 7 previous films. That's far too much work for the average moviegoer. And most people just remember the main characters anyway. Yeah, so something else that is slightly related to the Rob Zombie news is that Chris Hardwick, who is also in House of 1,000 Corpses, so he has a 3-picture deal with Blumhouse to make genre or horror films. And just, one of the many people that's working with Blumhouse that was not a writer-director before of material to put together different movies. And I'm not sure like if Hardwick's going to direct and write or just produce or what have you, but like Jordan Peele, who did Get Out, was on, Key and Peele as, like a writer and an actor. And then, so you have these different, voices that are involved in the media landscape that people are aware of, who are now getting chances to do, to run movies, to, write or direct or produce. And it's kind of unknown exactly when any of those films will be. It's just the, somebody too, because like, we're from Louisville, Kentucky. So Chris Hardwick is from Louisville, Kentucky as well. And I guess it depends on if you want to be I don't live in Louisville anymore, so it's the Louisville, or I'm from here, it's Louisville, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, so like it was just rewatching House of 1,000 Corpses. It's funny to think that like it was shot in 2000, so at this point it's like 17 years old, because Rainn Wilson, who is Dwight on The Office, is in it and looks a lot younger. And Chris Hardwick doesn't look that much different.
I mean, he's aged very well for a white guy.
Yeah.
White guys normally don't age that well. He's like 45 now, I think we looked up.
Yeah, and then like Sherry Moon Zombie is in it, and she, she still looks great.
Yeah, she's aged well, I think, too.
And then
but she definitely looks younger in this.
Just rewatching it, like Bill Moseley, I think, can still play like the same character with enough makeup. Sid Haig, I think, could too. They just have to probably write it around a little bit differently. But yeah, so there's really no information known about what Chris Hardwick's movies will be. It's just, I
mean, he could direct too, potentially, like, because Jordan Peele had never directed before.
Yeah.
And I was listening to, there's a DP podcast called The Wandering DP. And he interviewed the cinematographer for that.
Yeah.
And he has worked on several Blumhouse films. I think he worked on maybe the new Insidious also, and like maybe a Sinister or something, or maybe he did Insidious 3. But anyway, he works with Blumhouse a lot on films, and he's a kind of a seasoned DP. And so they said that what they'll do is, like new directors, they'll stick, DPs with them that have a lot of confidence and experience, because they can kind of guide them. It's like, okay, the director doesn't have to have any technical knowledge. We can just say, hey, they'll put on a zoom lens so they can work fastly and tell the director, do you want this angle, this focal length, this focal length. So, it sounds like Blumhouse kind of knows how to, set directors up for success, even if they haven't had projects before. So you could see them easily handing off a project for him to direct, maybe one of them, and then see how it goes from there.
Which, I mean, I guess like these different people getting these projects would give you hope, but at the same time, like, we're making short films and have no real name to speak of, but people like Jordan Peele and Chris Hardwick have quite a bit of following to begin with through other projects. But yeah, we'll have to see what comes of that. Like other news, there wasn't a whole lot of other stuff out there that was super relevant. The new Saw movie, Jigsaw, comes out this weekend. It looks like it's going to do decent at the box office.
Well, it came out if you're listening to this.
Or
right?
If you're listening to this, it's already been out. It looks like it's going to it'll do decent at the box office. And something
That's
that
good, I guess. I don't
something
know.
that none of us really wanted to see. And then the reviews for it kind of said there wasn't much that justified its existence. Yeah, so that was kind of, and then like there's like other news, like things you can watch if you're listening to this before Halloween, things you can watch if you want to get in the mood that are new. There's Stranger Things season 2 on Netflix. Creep 2 you can watch on video on demand via all the different services. I believe that the Leatherface movie is video on demand. Or
I think so.
So you can watch that. Amityville Awakening is on for free on Google Play. I still think. So that's out there. Then there's other stuff on Netflix that is new, that's original and kind of horror properties. So you have stuff like Little Evil, The Babysitter, both of which I didn't care for. But there's stuff out there you can watch for little money or free. But
and again, Shudder's $5.
Yeah, you can watch
Tons of
Shudder.
great. I watched a bunch of the Universal films on that this week.
Yeah, and then there's a ton of stuff on Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of really low budget stuff. You can watch Volumes of Blood and Volumes of Blood horror stories on Amazon Prime. So there's a lot of horror content out there you can watch. If you got, if you're listening to this, we're going to try to get this out as early as we can before Halloween. If you're trying to find stuff before Halloween, there is a lot of stuff out there. So I guess we can just kind of move into what we've been watching to kind of discuss any of that stuff. So like I said, so Little Evil, I know you'd watch that, right?
Yeah, I didn't love it.
It was the same director as Tucker and Dale versus Evil, and it has Adam Scott in it, so I like a lot of stuff he's been in. And, it's got Evangeline Lilly, who is, on Lost and the Ant-Man series and a bunch of stuff. So it was kind of something where I saw, it's like, okay, the pedigree of it coming from the same director as Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, which I really enjoyed, and being, just a newer comedy, I was like, oh, I'm going to check this out. I'll probably enjoy it. And just to me, from the opening of the movie, it just felt generic as hell. Because it had, like, that really bad generic music in it that I know I talked about the movie, the Joe Dante movie, Burying the X. Like, the music just took me out of it 110% because it's kind of just very generic, like, like instrumental music that just
Sounds like it's placeholder for the editing and not like a final score.
Yeah, so and not done in a way that's meant to be the joke. It's just used with a straight face.
Yeah.
And so the Little Evil to me felt the same. And then it also did like the cardinal sin of movies that are comedies where you have a character that's like humping stuff in the back. Somebody's on the phone. There's a character in the background humping or doing all this ridiculous stuff. And it's like not once in my life have I ever seen anybody ever do that. Because like there's a part where like one of the Adam Scott's characters like in his cubicle and like this coworker is like behind him doing stuff on the deck or like on the cubicle wall, and it's just like that to me, like having worked in the office and like known a bunch of goofy ass people, nobody's ever done that. When I see that, it's like, that's not funny. Stop doing it. It's not funny. I don't want to see somebody humping shit in the background or doing all kinds of weird stuff because it's not funny. And to me, that just indicates that
it's a total like red flag for you, right?
Yes. Yes. So the rest of the movie, just a lot of the jokes fell flat. It was, kind of like a comedic take on The Omen, which is kind of an odd thing to do because The Omen hasn't really been in the general consciousness or pop culture for a while.
I mean, I like the idea of it, kind of being a story about, being a stepfather, and stuff like, and having a stepchild and trying to connect.
Yeah.
But that stuff didn't feel real enough to have any real weight to it. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, it didn't really deliver on that end of telling kind of an honest story on that level.
Yeah.
But then the horror stuff was pretty generic. And then the humor wasn't all that great. There were some moments I laughed in it.
Yeah.
But on the whole, it was not anything I would ever watch again. Yeah. And I love Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Yeah, so I was just disappointed that it didn't really seem to deliver on what I was expecting out of it.
Yeah, at one point I almost thought it was going to take a little twist and kind of expand the scope.
Yeah.
Because I think there's like, you think maybe some other kids, I don't know, they look like the Shining Twins and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to go into almost like a bunch of like horror kids, like everybody had kids that were almost like different versions of these iconic children in horror and their own little horror stories. And I thought, that'd be cool if they kind of expand the scope.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really do that. It almost like just shows you an idea and then goes nowhere with that. And I'm sure it's just a gag in the film, but I was hoping for more because, the basic premise was just kind of, I don't know, it kind of got stale really fast.
Yeah, you got a guy that married a woman who had a kid who was essentially Damien from The Omen. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of joke, and it gets worn thin pretty early, but... So, that's Little Evil. It's on Netflix. You can check it out if you want.
Another film, I don't know if the Duplass brothers, I think they did it. I'm pretty sure, I'm almost positive they did. But Cyrus, have you seen that?
Is that the one with Jonah Hill?
Jonah Hill and, I can't think of his name now, from Steve Brule. Steve Brule and Talladega Nights and... You looking it up?
Yeah, so it's got John C. Reilly, Marissa Tomei, Jonah Hill, Catherine Keener.
That is like John C. Reilly starts dating Marissa Tomei but Jonah Hill is like not having it because he's a new boyfriend.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the same sort of story, but it's done really well, I think. And it's not like a 10 out of 10 film, but I went to theater to see that when it came out and really, really enjoyed it. Because it tells like kind of an honest story at the same time too. But that was what the bummer was about Little Evil, because Tucker and Dale, you know, it had some like sweet moments in it, but it was, you know, for the most part, just like a comedy. This seems like it could have been a little bit more and had more weight to it, and it wasn't taken advantage of.
Well, it
really.
seemed too like a big difference was Tucker and Dale. A lot of the comedy came from the characters acting straight faced in a situation, and then the result of the situation being funny.
Yeah.
As opposed to Little Evil was the characters themselves trying to do things that were funny.
Yeah.
Which I think is a big difference, and maybe that's, you know, like the babysitter I had issues with, because like whenever people like draw attention to the comedy they're doing, to me.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you can do something.
Because then if it misses the mark, then it's a turnoff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because like I'm more of a fan of a situation being comedic than a specific character trying to be. Yeah. So Little Evil was something I wasn't a huge fan of. I know I talked before about the babysitter, and I still see so many people talking about how they love it.
Yeah, I need to watch that.
Maybe it's just like a taste thing but just to me, like
Derek didn't like it either.
No, yeah, Derek didn't.
He's
like
not
it.
here today, so he is not getting any treats for Halloween. Only
He had to-
tricks.
He had to work overtime again, but yeah, like the babysitter. I've seen a lot of people talk about how they really enjoyed it, but to me, it just felt so freaking generic and rehashed all these different tropes from things that is just like a lesser version of a lot of things that I did like, and it was very in your face with comedy. And it set things up very clearly that you knew were going to come back into play. But it's just like, I don't know what it is. Maybe my taste is out of touch with some of this stuff. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people who are liking it weren't like teens, because I thought, well, maybe the babysitter's aimed at teens. Who maybe if you're 15, you'll love it. But a lot of the people who I've seen talking about enjoying it a lot are our age or older. So it's not like, you know, some generational thing. So I just did not care for Babysitter.
Yeah, I'm gonna check that out post Halloween, because I'm still kind of in the Halloween mood, watching as many of those type of films as possible right now. We're recording this on Saturday morning, so Halloween's a couple days away.
October 28th. And then like something recently I watched that I did enjoy that was horror or horror-ish or horror-esque. And I've actually seen articles debating whether or not this is horror, is Creep 2. So the movie that's Mark Duplass, that's a sequel to the original Creep, which is a documentary style type found footage film that the first one's on Netflix now if you want to watch it, and then Creep 2 is on video on demand. I think it'll go to Netflix eventually, because in the credits even said like Netflix Productions or something. So I think it'll go to Netflix eventually. But right now you can rent it for like $4 or $5 on iTunes, Google Play, all of the various services.
That's a good price. I didn't know how much it would be. Considering it's going to come soon, that's a good middle ground, really.
Yeah, and I don't want to spoil too much about it, because I did not watch a trailer before seeing it. But then the description when I was looking to rent it through Google Play had like a one-line synopsis, like, damn it, that gave too much away as it was anyway.
Man, so don't read that synopsis.
So I mean, it didn't really tarnish the enjoyment of the overall.
But you were going in totally cold anyway.
I was going in cold, and then just to see, like when I was searching for it, the one sentence. And the thing is, that really doesn't spoil anything, because that's kind of all up front in like the first 5 minutes of the movie. But just like basically, and without spoiling the first Creep either, because I think if you don't know what the first Creep is and you haven't seen it, it's on Netflix. It's not very long. It's only like 70 minutes. So you can check it out. And it's
I could see people debating whether that's horror or not, because it's almost like a uncomfortable situational, like just you get like a creepy vibe watching it, or being in that situation, because it's found footage and you're with this creepy guy. And that's about as, maybe there's things get pushed a little bit further, but that's kind of the milieu of the film. It's not all like tension and jump scares and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like in between the two films, there are some jump scares, but they're handled a little bit differently. And the first one is more of like uncomfortable situations, and you're not really sure, you have to just watch the movie to see like how it ends to kind of get an idea of like where things are going and what the level of threat or danger really was through anything. And that's just, that's not really spoiling much. It's just saying, it's a movie that's all about, there's only two characters, and then it's basically just seeing like what's true and what's not.
It's a very different film, and you know what I mean? And just kind of
Because it's documentary style.
the mood and just kind of the pacing and kind of, I don't know, the feel of it. It's very cool that it is almost so original.
Well, and two, like it's these movies that look like they're micro budget because there's, two characters, not a ton of locations, mostly shot in like a house. And then Creep 2 kind of follows that tradition. And, a lot of sequels go bigger or better. I mean, Creep 2 goes a little bit bigger. I mean, not really. I mean, I would assume the budgets for the two movies are around the same. And the dynamic in the second one is different. So it's not retreading the same story beats of the first one.
Does it seem like it's it seemed like it's worth making, or a film that was, that you're glad they made?
Yeah.
Enough.
Yeah. I mean, because maybe like what I'll do is I'll just like give general thoughts, and then I can do like not even spoilers, just a discussion of some of the plot points, and I'll just like, you can skip ahead if you want. But so the second film approaches the character from a different perspective, and it changes like the layout for how things are working. And the relationship between the two leads is much different than the first film. And the end does go into a little bit more cliche territory, a little bit more standard territory. But up to that point, there's a lot of stuff you don't really know exactly what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And it does like some character work where you get what you would assume is genuine information. And it wasn't like going in without really knowing what to expect. I was like, what would they make the sequel to this? If they just redo the first film, then it's not all that entertaining. Because a lot of the tension comes out when you have a sequel, because you know where the first film ended. So there's information you didn't have for the first one. Mm-hmm. So this one changes that formula up. So it still works because it doesn't just rely on the same bag of tricks. It does different things. So, it was overall, it's something if you enjoyed the first film, I think you'll enjoy this one. It's out there to rent. I enjoyed it, and I had a fun time with it. And it is interesting to see filmmakers like Duplass like do stuff like this, where it's, I would assume, relatively low budget. I mean, like the budget couldn't have been over $100,000. I don't see how it was. So you have like these kind of micro budget projects that can still explore different things and do things a little bit differently and new, and use the doc style or found footage format, but not have it be nausea inducing with shaky camera that's terrible and hard to deal with, and kids running around the woods screaming. Because I rewatched Blair Witch the other day because it's on Amazon Prime now, and just that style ground on me. The super shaky people running around in the woods type stuff. This doesn't do that. There's more steady camera work, and there's more character work. So it's a movie I enjoyed, and I'd recommend checking out. In terms of giving a score out of 10, it's not like a 9 or 10, but it's like to me it's like a solid 7 or 8, like something I'd recommend checking out if you enjoyed the original one. And it's just one of those things where I would enjoy seeing more filmmakers do these kind of micro budget projects that don't take a ton of resources or time, and doing different things. And I could see them making another movie with this series as well. Mm-hmm. And just like if they did, hopefully they would do what they did with this one and come from a different angle. So that's all I would say. If you're interested whatsoever, you can check out the first one. It's on Netflix. I would watch the first one before the second one, because I think that's kind of the starting point. Assumes I mean, it shows you what happened in the first one too, but seeing the first one I think is important before seeing the second one. So like I said, I'd recommend checking out the first one's on Netflix, and then just so if you don't know anything whatsoever about the movies, you can skip ahead.
Keep it light.
Yeah, keep like a minute. You can skip ahead a minute. So the first movie is, like I said, more about, there's two characters, is one of them telling the truth. And that's kind of what the movie's about. So that's kind of the setup. The second film, the character outright tells the other character, lays it all on the table and tells them the truth. So it changes the dynamic between the two movies. So one of them is like, the tension of what's true. And then the second film is, the other character knowing up front what the truth is. Mm-hmm. And it's just, do they actually believe that that's true? And, as a audience member, you don't necessarily know that all of it's true either. You know that one element is true, but you don't know if everything is. So the dynamic gets flipped, and then it's more about this character, just wanting to get the human interaction piece for like, they're doing like a web series, so where they interview people or interact with people. So just wanting to get that, awesome story. So they changed the dynamic between the two films. And like, that's all that's not even much spoilers to begin with, but that just tells you that it is a different approach to both.
Cool.
So I enjoyed that.
I'm looking forward to that.
So you watched some of Stranger Things season 2 as well,
Just
right?
the first
episode.
just the pilot, yeah. Not the pilot, but the first
episode,
yeah.
which is appropriate because the first few episodes have to deal with Halloween because it's at the end of October. And I assume that Netflix doesn't give like their viewership data, but I would assume it's huge numbers of people watching this show this weekend. And the only thing that sucks for people is the show came out on Friday, October 27th. So you really only get a 1 day to watch the series if you want to do a Halloween costume based on something from season 2.
I was thinking about that too. Like, as I was watching it, I was like, man, it would have been better to release this like at least a week before, just for marketing purposes. You know what I mean? Because people would be doing characters from this film. Because by next Halloween, people probably aren't going to be doing, it won't be as much.
Because I've seen people for this Halloween do 11, and then apparently too there was like some company made a sexy version of the 11 costume for women, and I just think that's straight up wrong. Like, it's okay to take, I don't know, like if it's a property that's for children, like Power Rangers. I think there's like sexy Power Rangers costumes where it's like a form-fitting like skirt dress thing, or a form-fitting like sexy cat suit or something. So it's one thing to take a property aimed at children, and then but they can also be enjoyed by adults who are played by adults in the property, and to make that sexualized, that's one thing. But to
sexualize young kids,
but to take a character that was portrayed as a young child, like 11 years old, that was played by an actress that was close to that age, and then to make a costume that is kind of this quote unquote slutty version for adults. To me, that's just going over a line, and
that's capitalism, baby. Anything to make a buck,
Yeah, because I saw that and I was like, how do I feel about that? I was like, I think this is wrong. And then I, asked Julie, and she agreed, like, that's just weird and wrong to have like a sexualized version of a costume representing a child character. But
yeah, give me the sexy Winona Ryder costume.
That's just like 80s like mom.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I watched the first 4 episodes, and without giving any story spoilers, it does appear as if the second season is trying to go a little bit bigger with some of its ambitions and some of the effects, and it seems like the budget might be a little bit more.
Yeah, I would assume the budget. I'm assuming they threw more money at this.
And 2, you kind of have, like when you come back to a second season, so the show, like the opening credits say Stranger Things with a 2 in it. So it's kind of taken the branding approach of a movie, because most shows, if they just keep the same theme between seasons and the same opening credits between seasons, they don't indicate what season you're in beyond like the numbering of the episodes. So Stranger Things seems to be treating season 2 more as a sequel to season 1, because even like I said, the title is like Stranger Things 2. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, it's more of a, I guess with sequels sometimes it's more of a fresh break than a series that almost like a long continuation.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? Because like this doesn't take place as soon as the other one ends or anything like that. It's like a year later or so.
Yeah, because they talk about like the year anniversary of the events of the first one. So, you kind of have like the introduction to all the characters You have some new characters. I don't remember if it was season or if episode 1 or 2, because I watched all of them back to back.
One has some new characters that they touch on in the opening.
Yeah, because
actually more than the opening moments, but
Well, you see some staples of 80 films or big properties from the 80s. You see Sean Astin, who who's in the Goonies, and then later in Lord of the Rings and all that stuff. So you see him, you see Paul Reiser, and then some of the stuff in this season has given me kind of an Aliens vibe with like flamethrowers and some of the sci-fi elements of it kind of give me, like the lighting and stuff kind of give me like some Aliens vibes. So you see those 2 new characters, and then you see like some younger characters. Was the dude with the Camaro and the mullet in the first episode?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you see some very 80s stuff, and they lean into a lot of the 80s-ness of it. But talking about 80s properties, like there's an arcade that has like the, was it the Dragon's Lair, like the arcade game?
Yeah.
And then
That game does suck. It is hard as hell.
And then there's like references to Ghostbusters and stuff throughout.
It's funny, like film sequels or like series sequels too. All of a sudden, the worlds are always bigger. Like they never went to the arcade in the old one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, of course, new characters are coming in. Which, granted, like some new characters that come in just came into town. But at first, I thought, oh, are these characters that just appeared even though they weren't in the original? You know, because they always do that with like series or movies or whatever. When it's like, you know, they're just building the world bigger because they've already mined all these other characters and elements so far.
Yeah, so it's going bigger. I mean, I don't even like the thing too is I haven't even looked at how many episodes there are in season 2 because I'd just rather be surprised to see how long it lasts.
There's 5.
So I'll watch 4. Yeah,
I think I glanced. It's probably somewhere around.
I mean, I would assume it's 8 or 10.
I think it's that ballpark there.
I don't think that they went to 13 like some of those Marvel series, but you know, so far, I mean, like the fact that I watched 4 episodes in one night because I was watching it with Julie, and both of us was like when episode ended, it's like, you want to do another? And then like so we watched. That was the interaction between the first and second, and then the second to third. She's like, oh, we can do another. And then between the third and fourth, she's like, what time do you have to be up again? And then we watched another one. So I'm enjoying it a lot so far. It seems like there's, you know, they're not just rehashing the exact same story from the first one. They're kind of expanding things out in a little bit different way. And some of the characters who weren't as big of a part of the story progression in the first season are big, like Will is involved more in the second season. So, you know, there's new dynamics and things going on. So it looks like to me, you know, it does feel like a sequel. And so far I'm enjoying it. And then there were some other elements they introduced early on. That'll be interesting to see how those tie back into like with the main cast. So I'm enjoying it a lot. And I think most people probably will enjoy this, you know, second season. To me, like without seeing how it all ends and comes together, I mean, still have to withhold judgment, but I've enjoyed what I've watched a lot so far. And I'm excited to continually watch more of this. I'll feel sad though once it's all done because it will have been burned through in the course of like a week or two. Unlike something like Twin Peaks: The Return, where we watched it week to week.
Yeah.
So the Netflix model of dumping everything at once is good and bad, and I don't know how it makes me feel sometimes because a show comes out that you're excited for, but then over the course of a weekend you're done with it, and then it's another year before you see anything else if it's an ongoing franchise. So I don't know how that makes me feel. And like we've even talked about doing videos of stuff. Netflix has a Stranger Things kind of Talking Dead-esque show where they break down episodes. Like, well, what's the point of that? If you're just going to go, I don't want to watch an episode and then go watch a discussion on it. I just want to keep watching because the next episode answers the questions. So I just keep watching it versus like something like Twin Peaks. If there is like time between episodes, then you do have downtime and you literally can't advance the story. So all you really can do is speculate or think about it or break it down. And I don't think that Stranger Things is a show that really invites the level of scrutiny or interpretation as something like Twin Peaks: The Return.
No, few mainstream American properties do invite that same sort of dissection as a David Lynch creation, you know?
Yeah, I mean, like sometimes like stuff like Game of Thrones, you can
theorize.
You can theorize, especially if once it's past the point of the source material, like the books. So there's just the storylines are going in new directions. You can theorize where things are going. But with Stranger Things, with all the episodes being out there at once, there's really, to me, no point to speculate because you'll just find out.
There's no mystery. You know, there's no like build up. It's just you can just immediate satisfaction.
So would the fervor around that show be more or less if it was released like weekly?
I mean, it's hard to say.
Who knows? But yeah, so far I've enjoyed it a lot.
For me, like I did enjoy the first episode a whole lot, but the things I enjoyed about it was it just felt it's just fun, like being in that town with those
Hawkins.
characters. And I was almost like, I kind of wish they would do a season where there's really no threat. It's just like
kids.
It's just a hangout film. You know what I mean? Like Linklater film. And that's what, like Dazed and Confused is, or Everybody Wants Some. Like that's what it feels. That's what part of this feels like at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then they'll like hint at like some things going on. But, and I think that's kind of where I have the most fun with this show is just kids being kids and these characters just being in the 80s.
So it could be, you want a cinematically shot version of that 80s show featuring the cast from Hawkins,
exactly,
Indiana.
Exactly. That's what I want. Because, I mean, I do like all the, the sci-fi and horror elements, but and it may be totally different with this one, but as we've talked about with the previous season, and so maybe some criticism was like, oh, we've all seen this before, it's been done. And
Yeah.
I enjoyed it regardless of that. I still
Yeah.
really liked it. But at the same time, yeah, it's kind of some things I've seen before. So like what's different about it is now the character, the characters are what's different about the show than
Yeah.
things we've seen before. And that's what I actually love. And I kind of like love being with these characters, and I like seeing them like stay kids and just being kids. And maybe it is going to be like that throughout the series, but it's almost funner for me when there's no real threat and they're just living their lives. I enjoy watching that. It made me think of Freaks and Geeks as well.
Yeah.
Like that's what it made me think of also. I was like, oh yeah, I love Freaks and Geeks. Like,
Yeah.
I just want another one of those shows.
Well, you get like compelling characters, and you get like the drama of, and it was interesting watching this after having seen it somewhat recently, because what's the actor's name? Finn Wolfhard, I believe. So the kid that is Mike in Stranger Things and was in it. It is he's like in it. His character is the one that's like the one that curses a lot. So it's interesting watching this show, and like every other word isn't cursing. But it's like, I mean, talk about like picking the right projects. Like that kid has
Yeah.
been in, 2 huge pop culture.
I haven't seen it yet, of course, because I had the baby. Things are busy, and it comes to VOD soon, so I'll be able to watch it, I guess, like right before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
But I was also thinking, like, what does this kid think, and all these other kids? They're probably like, why are adults so obsessed with the 80s?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they're probably like, what is their big fascination with the 80s? And maybe these kids, when they grow up with their creatives, they'll be doing shows that are set in 2010s.
Or the 2000s.
Yeah.
And look back fondly.
But yeah,
on-
it is a weird thing that like the 80s have been big for a while now. You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
think I started like getting into 80s music more heavily in high school in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And like 80s aesthetic and stuff like that was kind of coming back, and some things were, but it's almost just seems like to be more compounding now. Like it's almost like 80s is like reaching its peak.
Yeah.
And is it going to just continue, or is this wave going to end with, I mean, is it going to end till our generation is getting older,
I mean, like, will there be a generation that fetishizes the 90s and the way we do the 80s?
I think there probably will be,
Because, everybody thinks that, like, different generations were, like, a wasteland of entertainment. To me, the 90s seems to be a little bit more devoid of substance, but at the same time, I'm sure a lot of people thought that about the 80s
I
and
think,
the 70s.
I think like with vaporwave music and all that stuff, I think there is like a whole new wave of that 90s aesthetic coming. Like I follow a bunch of pages on Instagram. They're like 90s stuff, you know?
Oh, I can't wait for the new metal resurgence in 30 years when everybody is doing the rap rock corn sound.
Yeah. But I mean, I would be happy with a early 90s set Stranger Things type show as well. That, because I mean, that was close enough. I mean, that was also my childhood. I was born in 85. I mean, you were too.
Yeah,
as
like
well.
being born in the 80s, like my memories of the 80s are very faded and very few, and they're towards the end of the 80s.
But our fondness comes from all the films we grew up on being made in the 80s. Even though we were born in 85, if you're watching a film in 1990, it was made in the 80s. You know what I mean? Like
So
that's
you
like
get that
your
general
culture.
feeling.
You have the cultural I don't know.
And like 1991 isn't very far removed from the 80s. In a lot of ways, it's probably pretty similar. So you do get like the elements that are similar you feel. And like Back to the Future and a lot of stuff. Like I wasn't alive. Like I was alive when some of the... There was a lot of stuff that was alive when it came out, but I wasn't able to really watch it or appreciate it till I was older.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, but like the 80s nostalgia stuff, like... And it does... Like it feels like it's referencing a lot of stuff. It doesn't feel like it's gone overboard to the point, just complete winking and nodding to the point, like the Wet Hot American Summer stuff, like where they purposely are like making everything a joke. Like it doesn't reach that level of parody, but
they definitely lean into it.
They lean into it, and they have music.
It's not like Mindhunter, where even though it's set in a certain era, it's not like beating you over the head with it.
Yeah.
This is like every scene. Here's Dig Dug. Here's a Ghostbusters costume. At least in the first episode, which I'm totally fine with because that's kind of the fun of the show. It's not some it's not some heavy weighted series or really serious drama. Like it's supposed to be popcorn fun, I think.
Yeah. So enjoying that a lot so far. I'll be checking back as I watch more of it. I'm trying to think. I think that was pretty much all this stuff. Like I finished American Vandal, the Netflix series, which was kind of a parody series. It was like one of those true crime, like serial type series that was about whoever drew graffiti, drew penises all over all the cars in the faculty lot at the school. And it's about examining, the prime suspect for that who got blamed. Like, was he the one responsible? And then kind of going through like the high school like cliques and groups. So I found that show to be very funny, but then also towards the end, it was kind of bittersweet and poignant and like a little bit deeper than you would think. So overall, I really enjoyed that. And apparently got announced they're going to get a season 2, which I'm not sure how I feel about that because I think season 1 kind of wrapped things up I think it's going to be like covering like the same character who was like the lead investigator and documentarian, like covering a different scenario. So that would be interesting to see if they can recapture the magic. But I thought that was a really fun show that had very funny moments, but then like brought you back around and like said, okay, this few episodes ago that was really funny that you delved into. Now here's the real world impact of what that did to the people involved.
And is this a British show? I mean, I feel like, are the kids British?
No, it's American.
Why did I think that from the trailer?
It's American Vandal.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, it made me think of The Office, the British version of The Office, where, it's very funny, but then by the end of it, it kind of brings things back around.
Yeah.
And tells a very, like, sweet story.
Yeah, so it's I'd recommend checking that out, but that was kind of all the stuff I watched this week. Oh, I did watch Saw 3.
Yeah.
Those movies are very much of their time. And then I forgot, like, Jigsaw died in Saw 3.
What?
Yeah, because I'd watched all those and I kind of forgotten the timeline of them because I'd seen the different ones at different points in time. So Saw 3 is when Jigsaw dies, like literally, and then the remaining films are all just machinations of plots playing out and people that were involved with him, and you still hear his voice and see the puppet and stuff. But like he was dead from the third film on, and they went on for like what till part 7, and then it stayed, and then or whatever the last film was, Saw 3D. In 2010, and then it took 7 years for this new one to come out. That, from what I've read, Jigsaw didn't come back from the dead or anything, but like his voice does appear, I would assume, because of like an acolyte or somebody using his material. But Saw 3 like had some effective moments, but the movie even remarks that they made the games unwinnable because a lot of them people are already pretty messed up to begin with, and then to try to survive is only going to end up like debilitating them anyway. Mm-hmm. So they're in situations where they really can't do anything to win. And the movie even commented on that. But then like Jigsaw, I don't know, like the complicated plot necessity or the complicated plot of those movies became unnecessary to me. And then I kind of checked out at a certain point because like even if they have some effective set pieces here and there, these are like, for this to be like this exploitation style torture porn film, there's far too much plot here that's overlapping, and a lot of it's painfully obvious from the beginning what it is, and it takes to the very end and you're like, oh, okay, well that's this person is related to this person in this way. But there's a lot of stuff where it's just like that franchise had a good concept, made a lot of money, and just kept making entries year after year. And then in the trailers you would see like a glimpse of a really cool looking set piece, and you watch the movie like, oh, that was cool. But then there's all this like early 2000s aesthetic and music and jump cut editing and all this, somewhat overacting from different people, and you really don't care about any of the characters. So there's, if you see somebody in a trap and there's really no backstory, there's no reason for you to care about them.
Aside they're going to die.
Aside from like, oh, maybe they're attractive or that whatever. Like aside from that, they're going to die. So there's really not much tension to it. It's just seeing kind of gross out effects. To me, it's much more effective if, you have buildup and then the trap comes at the end and then you really do care. But, so I don't think I'll be watching past part 3. I watched 1 through 3 just to kind of, because we're just talking about them a little bit since the new one came out. But watching parts 1 through 3 did not inspire me to want to watch the new one or to go back and watch parts 4, 5, 6, and 7 or however many they made. But
yeah,
it seems like that was like a launch pad for, like James Wan launched from that series, from directing the first one, and Lee Winnell, who was like in the first one and like a co-writer, and then directed Insidious Chapter 3 and was in some other stuff, like as a launch pad for some names that are pretty big in horror now. And you had different directors involved with them. Because I think some of the directors, like Darren Lynn Bozeman directed like I think parts 2, 3, and 4. And then there was other directors involved with like 5 and 6 who made those collector movies in the collection who were supposed to make Halloween. So you had different horror directors kind of spawn out of that franchise, or different writers and directors and things like that. Or maybe they were writers of those films and then made Collector. Patrick Melton or Duncan something. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I just know that there was like different groups. One of the groups of those writers of some of those films were supposed to make the new Halloween. I'm glad they got Danny McBride and David Gordon Green and not somebody from the Saw lineage. But yeah, so we're I mean, maybe we'll cover the new Jigsaw movie if it hits like a streaming service or something. Just nothing about it appealed to any of us, and Derek really didn't want to see it.
Yeah.
And I mean, it looks like it's going to do decent at the box office, but hopefully that won't inspire more of the kind of torture porn or body desecration type movies.
So the original ones are on Netflix, right?
Yeah, I think all the original series are on Netflix.
So maybe Jigsaw will hit Netflix like next year or something.
Like I would assume the timing.
I would do that instead of renting it.
I would assume the timing of it worked out to have the first ones on Netflix to help promote the new one.
Yeah.
Which maybe worked, but because like a lot of TV shows become popular when they hit Netflix.
Yeah. Maybe by the end, maybe this time next year, Jigsaw will be on Netflix or something.
Yes. So did you watch anything else?
Yeah. So I got that Shudder trial, which I had Shudder before, but obviously we're kind of budgeting now with the baby and everything. So I burned through some Universal films, watched Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Dracula, and the Wolfman. I had only seen like, oddly enough, like bits and pieces of a lot of these on TV. Like actually Dracula, and Wolfman, I don't think I've really ever watched much of those.
Yeah.
Bride of Frankenstein and Frankenstein kind of run together if you've just seen them on TV, because it is a lot of Frankenstein running around.
Yeah.
I like both those films a lot. Like Frankenstein was always probably my favorite monster as a kid. Like that was the first monster I dressed up as for Halloween. And I was watching these two. One, I just had never sat down and watched them from beginning to end. And we had got Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, and my wife and I were going to watch that. She had never seen that. So I thought, okay, well, this year I'll watch the Universal films before that. I didn't watch them all, but I at least watched the ones of the characters that are in Abbott and Costello. Wolfman, parts of it I liked, but Lon Chaney, the Wolfman, he's like kind of a sleazeball a little bit. He's essentially like spies on a woman through a window and then tells her that he's psychic. That's why he knew that she had something on her dress. And then he's like, actually, I looked at you through the window through a telescope. And she's engaged, yet he's still like going after her and everything. So not a great character, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that's the thing with the Wolfman too. Like I didn't love the characters too much in that film. I liked them in Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, and Dracula. Like I liked all those characters a lot in that film, in those films. Wolfman, not as much, but still a fun film. And the best thing about those movies is they're like an hour and 10 minutes each.
Yeah.
That's almost my favorite
quicker
thing.
run time.
Yeah, so it's like it was easy to burn through all of these. Then I watched Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, which I've seen a million times. I hadn't really watched it probably in like 10 or 15 years though, but was like one of my favorites as a kid. And probably like the first, maybe like the first like horror-ish at all movie I've ever watched. Yeah. Because my dad was a huge fan, and as long as I can remember, I watched that film, and not just around Halloween, like all times of the year. But I just never owned a DVD copy or Blu-ray. So about the time VHSs faded out in the late 90s, I hadn't watched it since then. And that film still holds up a lot, I think. And I think it is just the humor and the banter and, the kind of archetypical, dichotomy between the two characters, like Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, like the straight man, the skinny straight man, and kind of the chubbier, fatter, funny guy. Yeah. And just like kind of the dialogue interplay, I think is really clever. The gags are great. And really there's a lot of fun in that film. Like the things I always loved about it was like, by the end of that movie, Frankenstein is chasing them around, and, the Wolfman and Dracula are like fighting. Like it was like, it's an exciting film at the end of that movie as well too. And it kind of gives you what you want out of it. Even though I probably think the beginning of that movie is so strong, and that's kind of where some of the more, I guess, scary moments come along. Like obviously to us now, it is not scary in the slightest. Yeah. And it really wasn't scary to me as a kid, but some of the tension with Dracula's coffin and stuff like that. But absolutely love that film, like one of my favorites of all time. The Blu-ray is really good too. It looks great, and then it's got some great special features from like Bela Lugosi's son was on there talking about
Yeah.
the set, and Lou Costello's daughter, and they basically talked about how they hired somebody to keep the set light. Like they played a bunch of jokes on the set. They essentially hired like almost like a comedian or an entertainer to come on the set and screw things up,
Yeah.
like throw pies, like break scenes and all that, because they said to keep the energy level up high
Yeah.
for comedies. But like Bela Lugosi, he was so professional, he was not in on it. They said he loved it like when he wasn't involved in the scene.
Yeah.
But if it was his scene and he was acting, he did not like it at all.
So he was like the Jared Leto of his day,
Yes.
and wanting to stay in character and do.
Yeah. But love that film. I'm going to watch it with the commentary on it soon. But yeah, then I watched Stranger Things, and then watch some Halloween films.
Yeah.
You know, those were on TV. This year I'm still going to watch Season of the Witch. I haven't watched that yet.
Yeah.
And I might put on Halloween, the first one, because I've seen some of that already this
Yeah.
year, just being on AMC or whatever. Halloween, that one was on. Halloween 4, 5, 6. Like I was just in and out on those
Yeah.
as usual. But I don't think I've ever seen 5 and 6 from beginning to end
See,
on disc.
5 is the one, like I'd seen, because like back in, I think it was in middle school or I don't remember exactly what age. At some point when I was like 14 or somewhere around then, like a lot of times on weekends with my parents, like we'd rent like, or during the summer, getting close, like it was end of summer, it was getting close to fall. Like we'd rented all of like the Friday the 13th and Halloween films. And so, like, Halloween 1, love. 2, I still enjoy it. We actually skipped 3 at the time because it wasn't like the main continuity. Part 4 is an effective, a straightforward, and unexciting film. Part 5 is the one where it's like they spend all this time at the freaking like barn farm party.
Yeah, just seeing
and Michael spends most of the movie driving a freaking Camaro.
Yeah, seeing so much of that on TV has never led me to sit down and watch the meeting.
And then part 5 introduced like this kind of creepy character. It almost feels like Resident Evil kind of had character, like the Nemesis almost. Like there's like a character that you see that has like the kind of like creepy looking hand that has like a briefcase wearing like a long overcoat and is walking around. It's like, ooh, who is this creature? And then part 6 completely undoes it because it's just some kind of like standard like white dude with white hair who's like in his 60s. It looks like some doctor. So it's like, oh, that really wasn't scary at all. And then part 6, you have like the Cult of Thorn and all of that additional stuff. And
did you ever watch the
Paul
director's
Rudd.
cut of that version?
No, because I've heard, I only watched whichever one was on TV and was on Netflix,
Yeah.
which like the theatrical cut. Like there's like the director's cut that's supposed to be better, but it doesn't fix a lot of the story issues. And there's like apparently an alternate ending where Loomis is the one that ends up with the curse from Michael. And
Maybe we should check that out one day, just because that's somewhat, relatively new.
yeah, because I know like for a while it existed like there was it was more of like a pirated thing that you could find
Yeah.
on torrent sites, but now there's like the official box set and releases that have it, and you can buy it as a standalone as well. And it's just one of those things where I never really part 4, like I said, is a pretty straightforward, effective film that's like, okay, well, Michael
just
Myers
more
is still
Michael,
scary,
yeah.
and here's kind of a standard story. Part 5 was kind of like, I don't know if I like this anymore. Part 6 was like, oh, it's kind of goofy. And then that ended the franchise for a while. And then they came back with H2O, but
Yeah. Yep. Not a huge fan of those later Halloween films. That's why I've only just watched them basically around Halloween on AMC.
yeah.
The only other thing I partially watched that was really bad was I, Frankenstein. You know what that is?
The Aaron Eckhart film.
Yeah, I'd kind of forgotten what that was, but again, like I just had my daughter and like stuff's just on TV.
Yeah.
And it's like Sci-Fi Channel was on because I was watching there was like some pretty good horror films on Sci-Fi this year. Actually, I think Drag Me to Hell was on there too.
Yeah.
But so because I had her, I wasn't like reaching for the remote, and I watched like the first, I don't know, too much of that film.
Yeah.
That is so bad. Have you ever seen any of that?
I've seen the trailers. I think I've seen bits and pieces.
Wow. So especially coming from the original ones,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, they try to make him look attractive. So it's set, back, I guess, whenever Frankenstein was created. But all of a sudden there's like angels and demons.
Yeah.
And I think he's almost like the angels come down, he kills a demon or something, and they're like, oh, how did he kill him? And they're like, oh, well, he's not human. So that's the hook that like he's not a regular mortal, so he can fight demons. So it's, I think, angels and demons, but Frankenstein's maybe the savior. It's very, and like they don't want the demons to get the Frankenstein's monsters as savior, but they don't want, which they call him Adam, I guess, because Adam and Eve, because from Frankenstein, they talked about him creating life. They don't want him to get the Frankenstein's journal, his medical journal, because then it proves that God isn't the only creator of man. But then again, it's like, well, he didn't create him from scratch. He put pieces together of people. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's that 2010, 2011, like big budget action film that just seems totally for nobody that tries to be for everybody. And I was like, man, this is incredibly dumb, and trying to make Frankenstein look attractive is just weird. Like, that's not appealing. I like Frankenstein's monster. I like the way he looks.
Well, too, like, it reminds me of the Van Helsing film with because like I never watched I Frankenstein. I just remember seeing the trailer for it and seeing bits and pieces. But like the Van Helsing Hugh Jackman film from like the early 2000s, I remember being like, oh, they're trying to like bring back the Universal monster, like, characters, because they had like a Wolfman in it and Dracula and Frankenstein's monster and Van Helsing. So it's like they're trying to make like this kind of Universal monster-esque universe, but they want the lead to be attractive. Then you got Kate Beckinsale running around in it too. So you're trying to like modernize and, ramp up like the attractiveness level of those movies and make, like action franchises out of them.
Well, it's like you strip away what makes it original and the original tone and feel, and you kind of water it down to
make it generic action,
to appeal to a wider base, and then it loses what's special about it. So then, it doesn't have any strong identity of its own.
Like a Universal Monsters aficionado is not going to care for the Frankenstein film.
Yes, no.
And then the younger audience is going to pass over that and go for something that's more in tune with their taste. That's a franchise they're aware of.
Yeah, I think I looked up, and that film did not do well financially. And then I think I was just like, this movie's so bad. I wonder what it got. I think it had like a 6% or 3% of Rotten Tomatoes. And I believe it.
They've tried to because they had like that. They had that one Dracula Untold film. Yeah. And then, you had the recent like Dark Universe with the Mummy that seems like that's all falling apart. So hopefully somebody can figure out what to do with some of these characters, if anything. But it seems like some of these recent attempts aren't really working. But
yeah, I mean, they haven't figured out how to mold them into kind of the modern films they want to mold them into. So maybe you don't go making these into $150 million movies.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Maybe you do the Blumhouse approach and you make them cheap.
If you gave these to Blumhouse, I'm sure they would turn out something interesting.
I think that there was part of the deal on that Dark Universe stuff is that they were going to make some lower budget version films through them. I'm not sure how that all stands now, but
and we have Del Toro's
Shape of Water.
Yeah, Shape of Water.
Kind of looks like his take on The Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Which he said he's stepping away from directing for a bit. Did you see that?
Yeah, because he's been involved with so many projects.
And one other piece of news too is Mark Frost. I guess there's the first like whisper of possibly some concrete confirmation. He was like, he's entertaining the idea of doing some more.
At Twin Peaks season 4.
And Showtime said, we're entertaining the idea of thinking about it also.
But then the reality is it took however many years to get the current season done, and David Lynch and all those actors aren't getting any younger. So I could see some people not really want it, unless they can get it together in like the next year. Mm-hmm. If it's going to take more than a year, I don't really see it happening. But yeah, so I guess we can move in now to our discussion of House of a Thousand Corpses, the Rob Zombie film. And this was his, feature directorial debut. And he had directed music videos and been involved with animation before this. But this was his directorial debut. And like I think it was done like 2000, and then they got into different issues with it and trying to get it released, and ended up not getting released till 2003 because it started out at like Universal. And I think that they shot some of it like on some of their Halloween like haunted house sets. And then it was, also shot like other locations, like somewhere in California. And like there's Universal monster stuff in it. Like there's like a Creature from the Black Lagoon poster and things like that. Because he had done like a haunted house for Universal for their Horror Nights thing.
I had forgot about that until you mentioned that earlier.
Because it was like Rob Zombie's American Nightmare and stuff like that. So
I mean, I was a big Rob Zombie fan and White Zombie. Prior to this film, I was all in. Like, I really...
Yeah, because I think, like, his big album, like, one of his big albums, like Hellbilly Deluxe with Dragula and stuff, came out in, like, 98. So just a couple years before this movie.
And I love that album.
So, you know, he had a big name and he had a following. And then he made the movie. And I think they've claimed that the budget was, like, the original budget was, like, $4 million. But then they got, like, an additional, like, almost $10 million because, like, the end sequence when they originally did it was bad. So they got a lot more money to redo the end with, like, bigger sets and more effects and more character stuff. And
it does seem like they spent some money on some character stuff on the end, which is kind of the cool element.
Yeah. I guess we'll be discussing spoilers throughout.
Yeah. So the thing about, you know, when you were talking earlier that they, you know, got part of the way finished with the film, I guess.
Yeah.
And didn't get to finish it off or didn't get to reshoot
I think
that stuff.
he got enough budget to shoot it, but not enough budget to shoot it as he wanted. So his idea was they would just go ahead and shoot it, and then they would see that it wasn't strong enough of an ending, and then just give them the funds to finish it out, which they did.
Well, you know, it's interesting because I remember, you know, probably, I guess 2002 or so, 2002, 2003, you know, we were in high school. We graduated in 2004. Talking to some friends because I think some of them were going to Rob Zombie concert like in Nashville or somewhere. And I was like, oh man, I wish I could go. And also too, I think the buzz was that at some of his shows, he was showing some of his film that he made.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing that it was like some of his film. So it must have been only like partially completed or maybe just he didn't want to show the ending or whatever.
Yeah.
But I always thought that was odd, but I really want to go to one of his shows. One, I liked his music, growing up with it, you know, in the mid 90s with White Zombie, even though it was a little bit earlier, but that's when I started listening to his stuff. And then Rob Zombie's Hellbilly Deluxe and his other albums. But I remember being really excited thinking, oh man, I can't wait for Rob Zombie's movie to come out. And then whenever it came out, I remember watching it over a friend's house. He was like, oh, you got to watch it. You know, he knew I liked Rob Zombie too.
Yeah.
And it was like 2:00 in the morning and he put it on because I think he had just got it or something. And I had watched the first probably like 35 minutes of it.
Yeah.
And both of us were super tired. We both just fell asleep. But I had seen the first 35 minutes and had never revisited it since.
Yeah.
I had just never had any desire. And actually, I own a copy of it. I think I bought it. Either I had bought it as soon as it came out or I bought it after that. But for some reason, it never titillized me to revisit it.
Yeah, I mean, because I saw this when it came out because one of my friends, like at the time, like his dad would always like find like new different movies, and they had just gotten like a big 65-inch like HD TV, so they always like rent new DVDs and watch them and stuff. So that's where I watched it. And at the time, like I was, you know, I wasn't a big fan, but I was like familiar with and enjoyed some of Rob Zombie's music and songs and stuff. Because at that era, like Rob Zombie, Korn, like all that stuff was kind of like in the general.
You knew who the hell they were, yeah.
And that was before Kid Rock was political and singing at conventions and Republican and national conventions and was, you know, singing about hookers and methadone and stuff. But, you know, so House of 1,000 Corpses. So when I saw it, it's like, oh, stylistically, it was interesting. But even at the time, so there's like the neon lighting and a lot of that stuff. I was like, I'm okay with this because some of that's just cool to look at. But even at the time, the thing that kind of took me out of it was some of his like music video directing sensibility coming through and like having like the cutaway scenes, like the home footage, or like the home movie footage of the different characters. The kind of just, you know, cutting back and forth to that type of stuff to me, even back in that era, it took me out of it and kind of robbed any of the tension of it. And at the time I saw this, I had not seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. Because this would have been like 2003, so I think I'd seen most of the original and then saw the 2003 Jessica Biel version because I did not see House of 1,000 Corpses until it was on video later. So like I didn't really connect the dots as much of like if you watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 and then you watch House of 1,000 Corpses, like, oh, this is very stylistically exactly where he's pulling from because the end sequence, the Firefly Clan's like underground lair looks very similar to what happened in Texas Chainsaw 2, and the over-the-top characters and things like that are much more in line with that film. And
Baby's almost like a Chop Top in this version.
Yeah.
A little bit, you know?
And then you have Bill Moseley, who was Chop Top.
Yeah.
And then, you know,
but he's a little bit more serious.
And two, something I noticed in the movie that I kind of, because I hadn't watched this in full in a while, I forgot about the kind of, there's sometimes like almost like synthy build-up music when you thought things were going to happen. And then like, I forgot that was kind of the, because like, you know, the staple of the Rob Zombie films after that were just the Southern rock and everything, you know, and Devil's Rejects and his Halloween, there's, you know, a lot of Southern classic rock. And when you watch that and it's a little bit more of a mishmash, and then, you know, there's like I said, like the thing that took me out of it back then watching it was the kind of cutaway footage.
Yeah.
And
it's, I mean, I've even done this too, like hard to have the confidence in yourself to keep things entertaining and like trust in the story. So you throw other things in there to make it a little flashy.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, hopefully doing this, the audience won't get bored. But then again, it has a reverse effect where it does bring on even more boredom because it does take you out of it.
Well, because too, like from what I had read with like interviews with Rob Zombie after the movie came out, he had said that it wasn't intended for the tone to be as goofy and black comedy as it was. It just kind of came across more of that way as they filmed it and got into it, because he's a first-time director and didn't have as strong of a hold on the material and all the stuff like that. So that movie, like, I think was intended to be more close in tone to Devil's Rejects, where it's more straightforward and scary. Or, you know, or not necessarily scary, but straightforward and not, I mean, there's humorous elements, but it's meant to be like gross and dirty.
This film is, you know, it's just like kind of more of a hokey exploitative film. And really there wasn't a lot of big exploitative genre films at that time that felt like they were from the 70s.
Yeah.
And that was probably the appeal of this, but it wasn't like a great film on its own.
Yeah, if you took out the referential elements to kind of that era, so like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Hills Have Eyes, if you take out all the kind of references to those types of genre films, and, you know, this in and of itself, like, so it has like Rainn Wilson, it has Chris Hardwick, it has Bill Moseley, Sid Haig, I mean, you have, and then Walton Goggins, who would be a huge star now and stuff like Vice Principals and some Tarantino films, like Hateful Eight. So you have the, you know, different people in the movie that would go on to be bigger names, but in the movie itself, like, I don't know, it just feels too like there's a big clash in what's happening, because you have this kind of Halloween set, like urban legend type story about Dr. Satan, and then you have that juxtaposed with the very much like Hills Have Eyes, Texas Chainsaw Massacre-esque family, and there's even like a dinner scene and the kind of torture stuff. So you have like those elements. Then I feel like he didn't really go far enough with any of them to make them effective, because it's all just kind of it's like you threw a bunch of elements in a blender.
Focus. Yeah, you lose focus, because I'm like, what do I care about the Dr. Satan stuff? They care about it, but I don't care about it.
Yeah.
Even a lot of the characters, some of the female characters were running together for me.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I don't know who just died actually.
Yeah, because like after having not watched it for a while, I was like, well, shit, which is the final girl? Is it the one whose dad dies or the other one?
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, it's one. And then like, so then too, they kind of like Devil's Rejects is, you know, in my opinion, a far superior film to House of a Thousand Corpses. Like the progression you saw in his filmmaking from House of a Thousand Corpses to Devil's Rejects, if you had seen that from the Devil's Rejects to his next project, then I would be interested in his career. But then he went from Devil's Rejects to Halloween, where it just kind of felt like he was funneling his aesthetic through that franchise. Just because, like, in Devil's Rejects, they almost do some of the same stuff. They have somebody's face get cut off, so they almost revisit some of the beats and do them better in the next film. As opposed to, you know, like in House of a Thousand Corpses, there's, like I said, there's like the stylistic elements to me, like the kind of music video editing. Like, and I think it kind of goes with what you said, like maybe he didn't have the confidence in the story to be entertaining on its own. So they had all these insert shots. And apparently some of the stuff that they had shot that was made, like the different companies that were thinking about releasing it, like worry it be rated NC-17, that they eventually took out, were some of those kind of insert shots that had Sherry Moon Zombie like masturbating with a skull or a bone or something. So all these things that weren't relevant to the story or the movie to begin with being inserted in that caused it to be possibly NC-17. I mean, you have like your artistic vision, you have your creative vision, and, you know, you support that type of stuff. At the same time, if you're adding in stuff that's not necessary, that's causing you to possibly get an NC-17 versus R, then it's like, well, what are you doing? You're ruining.
Well, what film are you making? Are you trying to make a film that's going to be released theatrically?
Yeah.
Or, you know, or are you doing this pet project thing? Because they are two different things. And unfortunately, you gotta understand studios aren't gonna probably want to back that.
Well, I think too, like part of the thing is like he was involved with Universal, and then they had the Universal, like the haunted house that had his name on it, but they didn't want the haunted house to be named the same thing as an R-rated film or possibly NC-17 rated film, The House of 1,000 Corpses, because then this more family friendly thing that you can take kids that are 12 years old to. If it's attached to this R-rated, X-rated, NC-17 rated property, then that might make people think twice.
Yeah, they're afraid they're going to walk in with their 7-year-old and Sherry Moon Zombie's going to be masturbating to a skull.
Yeah, or you're going to see her ass cheeks and all this other stuff. So, and apparently I think there was more gruesome stuff, like the transformation of Rainn Wilson's character from being like the guy to like the bust that he made out of it.
That was not effective for me.
I mean, like, I remember, like, when I first saw the movie, because, like, a lot of times you have, like, the body horror stuff.
Yeah.
That really wasn't body horror. That was more kind of, like, a music video-esque, like, vignette type
Set
thing.
piece, yeah.
And it's like, that almost made me think of Tusk, that Kevin Smith movie, or, other things like that. But the overall milieu of the movie is just, I think that there was effective stuff in it, and there was performances that were decent, but the other thing is that Rob Zombie is always far more interested in the relationship between the outcasts and the freaks and the killers than he is in the normal people that are their victims. The antagonist of the film in this and Devil's Rejects is really the Firefly Clan. Mm-hmm. They're really the entertaining characters that you're interested in seeing. So you really don't care what happens to anybody. I mean, you see, like, in House of 1,000 Corpses, like, the cheerleaders there that they had, like, kidnapped, or the teenagers
But
that
you
were torturing.
You don't even know them before they're even kidnapped.
Yeah, because apparently initially some of the studio notes were they wanted to see the movie more about the teenagers. And then Rob Zombie's like, well, nobody gives a shit about the teenagers. And I mean, ultimately, it may have been true. But it's just like you have kind of like depraved, evil characters, and they're entertaining, so you're watching them. And then, I mean, and then the movie too has so many like homages to other things, like visually. Mm-hmm. I mean, there were some things that I thought were entertaining, like the moment when Walton Goggins, like deputy character, when Otis has the gun on him, then they pull the crane up, and that shot takes like over a minute.
Yeah, that was probably one of the, I guess, most inspired parts of this film. I think that kind of. Okay, we're getting to settle here and build up some tension at least. You kind of know it's coming, but at least had some sort of emotional reaction watching that versus a lot of the rest of the film.
Well, I mean, because that was a moment where it's like, maybe I haven't seen this specifically before, and this was just like a stylistic element. It's like, okay, I kind of like that. Mm-hmm. And like I said, some of the stuff like the lighting and a lot of that I was okay with. But two, this movie reiterated to me, so Chris Hardwick's character constantly, like, when they came out of the Captain Spaulding's roadside attraction, and he's like, Miss Dr. Satan, blah, 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 and like all that kind of in your face, constantly talking, overacting. I mean, that's all like on the writing and the directing, and it just feels like a lot of Rob Zombie's movies. So Devil's Rejects didn't really do that because it was more of like focused on the Firefly Clan, and those characters were a little bit more relaxed in their delivery and more discussion. But it feels like in his Halloween film, there's a lot of that too, of characters who talk a lot and talk in ways that people really don't talk. And it's all just for shock value and because he wants something happening. And like, so I felt like some of that character work, like Chris Hardwick's character, not really his fault, just the way it was written and directed, was kind of a grating, annoying character that seemed like his purpose was to drive the energy level up and to keep it, entertaining. When to me, it's like, shut the hell up. I don't want to.
Not everybody needs to be chop top, spouting off crazy stuff. Have one person that does that. It's one person's job that can do it well, like Bill Moseley.
Yeah, and then too, there's a lot of elements. Like, so we did that one like sketch, like the Thanksgiving dinner is directed by Rob Zombie, or in the style of Rob Zombie. And then like in this movie, when Otis has the mask on of the girl's dad, he like sticks his tongue through it. Mm-hmm. So like to me, it's like a staple of Rob Zombie things that somebody sticks their tongue through something. It's like, yeah. And there's just like all these elements you see there. And it's just like, and two, like, being in 2000, this is pre-digital red cinema era. Stuff shot on DV and digital back then looked terrible, or at least it was very obvious that it was digital. So it was shot on film. So the transfer of it in HD still looks good.
Yeah, I just watched, like I said, the DVD I have, and it looked really good. Like, I was surprised. And I remember the film looking a little nasty or not as good, but maybe I watched it on a old tube TV. I don't
Yeah.
remember what I had watched originally on, but I was surprised at how actually good this film looks.
Yeah. But also, to me, my mind contrasts so heavily or harshly against his other work, where it's very much like the 16 millimeter, or not 16 millimeter, like the super grainy kind of handheld aesthetic. So this movie really didn't have as much of that. It was more locked down in traditional cinematography, aside from like the vignette stuff from like the home footage. But and he still used that home footage shit in new movies. Like 31 had like, they tried to build the character development of all the protagonists through like the kind of like
that's
home
right.
video
I forgot
footage.
about that.
So he still uses that trope, and I don't know that I find that very effective.
Yeah, I don't either.
Just because in the universe of the movie, cutting back to home footage from like something happening in the present, it's like, so is this
You're not really revealing information. You're trying to reveal an emotional connection.
Yeah.
But it's just like a one-shot thing, and it's really not doing much to build that. It's just your preconceived notion of, oh, this is what a family is.
Yeah.
They were a family. I should feel sympathy. It's just,
Yeah.
just like if you see like a puppy left outside in the rain, like there's no story there. You just feel like I think he's hoping to gauge that based on just kind of what your mind places.
in something too, like say Cloverfield, where it's a found footage film and they're writing, like overriding parts of a tape, then you do like you can. Then it doesn't take me out of it as much because it's like, oh, well, in the cinematic universe of this, somebody was recording over a tape, so that's why there's this footage. But if you have something quote unquote happening in real time in the real world, and then you jump back to this footage for no reason. Like, I mean, that may just be nitpicking because stuff like that can work.
But it just doesn't. Yeah, it just doesn't work on a narrative level for me too much either.
It felt like it was just too much.
Yeah, the film feels very. Which I mean, I know it was his first directing effort. It feels just very scattershot, and it does not feel as focused. Like I'm surprised that Devil's Rejects is so good, being just the one removed from this.
Yeah,
because this film feels so unfocused. And it feels like he wanted to do a lot and kind of say a lot and kind of, be as flashy as possible. But, it proves that like, hey, if you reel things back and you really focus in, the story and the experience can be a lot more effective. Just like with, there's people that dissect like the number of shots in films, like Paul Thomas Anderson's films, like how many, he has a long films, but there's not as many shots in those as your typical action film or your normal blockbuster film. And because of that, every cut is more impactful and matters more. Like, there's something to be said for that, even though you may not have immediate attention. It may like test your patience in the moment sometimes, but on the grander scale and kind of the fuller experience, you'll be more invested in the story if you're not constantly kind of being pulled out of it.
Well, like I think too that House of Thousand Corpses is very much style over substance, because the movie stylistically has some very interesting looking set pieces and a lot of it looks interesting, but then there's not a lot of substance behind any of it. And I think too, part of it is with the protagonist. If you want to view the college age young adults as your protagonist, like they're all kind of weak characters, and the only relationships between them is like, oh, there's like a boyfriend and girlfriend, and then that's kind of like the only thing you really know. So you don't really have anything that makes you interested in their survival or really in their corner. As opposed, I think what made Devil's Rejects work better is you have Sheriff Wydell. Even if he is portrayed as the bad guy, he at least has a compelling arc and is entertaining on screen and, moves the story forward and does stuff. As opposed to these characters just kind of reactive and in the moment.
Yeah, he's not a dummy placeholder, just character to get mowed down.
Yeah.
It's like he has his own agenda and own story, and you kind of identify his path as well as theirs, even though like theirs, isn't of any sort of, even in their own mind, like moral high ground or anything like that.
Yeah.
Their journey is like survival. At least his, if you don't, on a moral level, if it's wrong, at least you understand his motives.
Yeah.
He has motives. He's not just kind of doing his job.
I mean, too, going back to like Devil's Rejects, like Wydell, like I don't think he's really the bad guy in that, because none of the stuff he did to the people he did it to, like they all deserved it.
Yeah. Well, he just acted outside of his jurisdiction. He acted outside of protocol.
It's just like,
as a normal person, if he wasn't a sheriff and you saw that, you'd say, okay, he's getting revenge. It's like there's a line drawn
like, it's one
between
of those
law
things,
enforcement and
like that the Devil's Rejects, like if you had that exact same script directed through the lens of say Clint Eastwood, it's a revenge thriller about this cop, taking out the trash.
Yeah.
Through Rob Zombie, he's far more interested in the family connections between these outcasts who make their makeshift family because you find out in Devil's Rejects that Captain Spaulding was the father of Baby, and then the Otis is just like a family friend that they kind of adopted into the family more so.
I mean, that makes the angle a lot more interesting, Devil's Rejects. You know what I mean? That's what made that film work so well, is that it came from a direction maybe you weren't expecting if you walked into the theaters and you thought, oh, Devil's Rejects, these are some bad guys that are going to get theirs.
And then too, like the some House of a Thousand Corpses, a lot of it, is kind of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Hills Have Eyes-esque, standard fare. Because then there's movies like Wrong Turn and those kind of the sequels to those and the Hills Have Eyes remake. And a lot of that stuff kind of came back in vogue in the 2000s. But you have the element of that, and you've had like a dinner scene, so reminiscent of some of like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre stuff. Yeah. And then when the younger group tries to leave, and then they get brought back and become the victims and become like they're held hostage and what have you. Then the film kind of goes into a different mode. And then the last act, when they're down in the underground catacombs of Dr. Satan, then it kind of just goes into a completely different type of realm. And that's where it kind of, to me, is like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 on steroids, because you have the kind of like pucker butthole face guy that's like looks kind of like something from like Castle Wolfenstein, and you have him with the axe,
and the other guy with all the
Dr. Satan,
with the almost like metal wings or whatever. Yeah, it looks like from that game The Suffering. I don't know if you remember that on Xbox, or PlayStation, but essentially it looks like a character design from that.
And two, that reminded me of like the House on Haunted Hill, maybe. Like that remake that had Jeffrey Rush and stuff. Like some of the characterizations of like the mad doctors and the nose kind of remind me of that. And I mean, there was a creepy element to Dr. Satan, almost having like this kind of mechanical aspect to him. But, like I think that if there was more of that type of stuff and that was the intent, then you get a different type of movie than what you got. Because as it is, it feels like this kind of heightened, more supernatural almost element grafted on to a Texas Chainsaw Massacre that's more grounded. And I mean, that's fine. And like in Devil's Rejects, they abandoned the character. They had shot a scene with Dr. Satan that they then took out that had Rosario Dawson in it. And I think it's just because they realized like that type of character with the tone that they were going for didn't really mesh. And with this new movie they're going to make, who knows? Like, will they go back to Dr. Satan more? Yeah. Is that type of stuff going to be more prominent, or is it more grounded? I mean, who knows at this point?
And stylistically, is he further away from Devil's Rejects now? It seems like he's almost looped back around to House of a Thousand Corpses. Yeah. Based on 31 and stuff.
Yeah. So like House of a Thousand Corpses, I mean, and a lot of times like too, being the filmmaker's first film, where he even said that like some of the stuff got a little bit out of hand from what he intended in terms of like it being more comedic and not as, straight laced as he thought it was going to be. So it's hard to super, go in and dissect somebody's first work or their first big movie, because there's a lot of learning curve and things like that. But it's just like, the movie, like I said, it's a lot of style over substance. I
think Captain Spaulding scenes are all awesome. Yeah. And again, Bill Moseley, he can carry whatever scene he's in for the most part. Yeah. I mean, like, I think those two are the strongest elements of this entire film.
Yeah, because I mean, like I said, even though there's good actors in it, like Rainn Wilson, I mean, it's the Captain Spaulding and Otis, like those characters, like their performances are great. And the stuff like early on when they're visiting Captain Spaulding's like roadside stop, and him and Rainn Wilson are having the conversation, and he's implying that, or Captain Spaulding seems like he's getting pissed, and then it turns out he's just messing with him. Like, that was effective, and it still works. And that character, he then put you at ease and made you like his character. Yeah. And like, so he was good. He was great and all that stuff. And I think it's just that Rob Zombie is great at writing material for Sid Haig and Bill Moseley, because he knows like the genre stuff they came from and the delivery, and I think they're in alignment there. The problem is when he gives dialogue like that to other people that aren't quite on the same wavelength as them,
or maybe they don't have as much experience. Like they seem like they can find out they can mine a little bit of gold out of that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and it's harder if you're just handing off some dialogue to somebody that maybe not can figure out how to make it work as well. And so then they just deliver it, and that's all you get. And then it just feels like, you know, hokey.
Yeah. So like the performances of like Bill Moseley and Sid Haig are great. I mean, Sherry Moon Zombie is serviceable.
I like her a lot. Like, I like her and Rob Zombie a lot, and I don't want to be too critical over her, and I like her in Devil's Rejects a lot. One thing I don't really love is her laugh in these films.
Yeah.
Like, that's the part that I really kind of...
I mean, and it's one of those things where it is...
Is that her real laugh?
Yeah, it's you know, is that like something where where they think it's hilarious and then just use it a lot?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, sometimes you can do something that's intentionally grating just to...
Yeah.
Because I would not
And they
think...
may be, but I don't...
I wouldn't think she laughs like that in real life.
Yeah.
I think that's like, you know, for that specific character. And in that movie, I mean, in the type of film it was, she gave a good enough performance. It's just the only time I've ever thought she was kind of like out of her depth or whatever is when they had her be the mom in Halloween. And I was like, I mean, I get that it's your wife, and I get that you love working with her, but is this really the direction that, like, Michael Myers having a stripper mother? Like, was that really the direction? But we don't need to go into that. But, you know, in this movie, and two, at the time it came out in the early 2000s, there really weren't a lot of the kind of grindhousey exploitation type films. You know, this was before Saw. And this was before kind of all the torture porn and Hostel and all that stuff kicked off, and even like Cabin Fever, because this was shot in like 2000. So this was before a lot of that kind of genre stuff kind of came back.
I mean, to go from like Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer and stuff to this, that's a different jump. And, you know, there's something to be said for that, for him to kind of, you know, do something out of the typical wheelhouse of what horror was doing at the time.
Yeah, because in that era, you had like House of a Thousand Corpses, and then you had Hatchet that came out in that same general time frame.
Hatchet?
Or it was maybe it was later.
Hatchet was later. I think that was like around 2007 or so. I don't know. And maybe it was earlier.
Let me look. Because I know a lot of that stuff came out. I'm trying to think of stuff that wasn't like the remake.
Hatchet was 2006.
So it came out a few years after House of a Thousand Corpses was released.
Yeah.
So, you know, multiple years after it was shot. So it came out 2006. So that was a few years later. But like House of a Thousand Corpses, you know, so that was before the remake boom really kicked off. I think it may have been released in the same year as the Texas Chainsaw remake. It came out in 2003, but it was shot before that. So, you know, you had the Texas Chainsaw remake, which was kind of like shiny and Michael Bay eyes through Blindham Dunes, and it looked like it did. And then if you watch the Rob Zombie House of a Thousand Corpses, it felt nothing like that. It felt more of trying to be like a throwback to the older ones. And now all the rage a lot of times is all the throwback exploitation films. And so at the time it came out, it was original in the fact that it wasn't, you know, a shiny slasher, because you had Scream and Scream 2 and I Know What You Did Last Summer, and then Urban Legend and Valentine's Day and Cherry Falls and all these movies that came out. A lot of them pretty bad. I mean, even I Know What You Did Last Summer was successful, and some people defend it, is not a very good movie. And, you know, even the Scream sequels, like Scream 2 I thought was really good. Scream 3 I thought lost his way a little bit. But you had all those like slasher boom sequels that came out of the Scream success, and then those kind of died off, and then horror was kind of in this holding pattern. And then you had something like House of a Thousand Corpses that was like a cult hit. Like, it made a little bit of money back I think it made close to its budget in its theatrical run, because it debuted like $3 million, I think made like 14 or so, and it made a little bit more internationally, made most of its money back on video. So it was a cult hit. But it wasn't like anything that changed the landscape of horror at large. And, you know, the same thing with Devil's Rejects. It was like made its money back, I think, or made close to the money, and then was a big hit on video, and obviously landed Rob Zombie the Halloween franchise. So these weren't landscape-altering horror films like The Blair Witch Project, which was the found footage thing that came out, you know, like 2009. So you had like The Blair Witch Project that really changed the landscape of horror. And then you later had stuff like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake being successful, made people want to go back and remine all these old properties instead of just doing referential films to them. So then you had The Hills Have Eyes, and you had pretty much anything. Like, there was a Prom Night got remade, Halloween got remade, they had the Friday the 13th reboot. So all those franchises got revisited. I'm sure there's other ones I'm forgetting about, like
Nightmare on Elm Street,
Nightmare on Elm Street, My Bloody Valentine,
Amityville Horror,
When a Stranger Calls, the Hitcher, the Hitchhiker, or whatever. So there's all these films that kind of got like rebooted or gone back to, but House of Thousand Corpses is more of just like, I want to stylistically pull from all these and make a new story.
Yeah.
So when people like, I remember at the time say, it's the most original horror film I've ever seen. It's like, well, it's not really original in that it's really just elements of other things, but it's not a reboot of a property.
It's not what you're used to seeing in theaters around that era.
Yeah,
know?
and then like I said, then you had like Saw come out like after this. You had the genre get changed in a major way with a lot of those films, because Saw was what, 2004?
It was in high school, I think, while we were in high school.
Yeah, because Saw, the first one's 2004. So you had a lot of these like landscape altering films come out, and I think the Rob Zombie stuff didn't really alter the landscape. It may have just,
He operated on a little bit different plane, but managed to still have a career throughout that.
I mean, I think that his work kind of fits into the same wheelhouse as Grindhouse, the Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez double bill kind of Grindhouse exploitation type film, in that money-wise, they didn't change a lot of things at the box office with those films, but stylistically, they inspired a lot of people to go back to those roots and to reassess those kind of like 70s and 80s movies that inspired them, or even 60s movies, and to kind of bring those back. So but the movie itself, The House of Thousand Corpses, when you review it as a movie itself without all those other elements or the knowledge of it's his first film, and you just watch it as a movie, this is one where like a lot of stuff you can recommend to people to watch. Like, if you aren't a big horror fan, you can watch like that movie Creep. You can probably watch that and be okay. This, like, I think if you don't appreciate any of those movies from the 70s and 80s, you're probably not going to get a lot from that.
It's probably lost even more value now that there's been so many of those types of films being remade. I think this film is weaker than it was back then, for a different reason than some of these other films are. You know?
And you have so many movies now that have done the kind of the faux exploitation or the throwback stuff.
Yeah.
And
you've got Captain Spaulding and Sid Hagen and Bill Moseley, but they're better versions of themselves pretty much in Devil's Rejects. So that also negates kind of any sort of value there, I think.
Yeah, because like the Bill Moseley character, like in Devil's Rejects, he's given way better material and more to do. And this one, he's kind of like half-cocked running around doing stuff. And when you go to the horror convention, you still see people dressed as the Otis character in like the garb from the end of the film. They're doing like that kind of set.
He said at his Q&A this year at Days of the Dead, I think basically like he didn't really find that character until they were shooting like the last scene, like when they reshot the stuff, I guess, in the underground. He's like, I really didn't figure out who that character was until like the final scene I shot of him. Yeah. He's like, I really didn't know. I can't remember what he had kind of explained, but I think he had thought that Rob Zombie wanted him to do Chop Top.
Yeah.
He assumed that maybe. I don't know. Yeah. But he said they didn't really figure it out till the very end there. So that's why it was nice to do Devil's Rejects and kind of have a good basis as far as what that character was.
Yeah. So like I said, it's a House of Thousand Corpses. It has a lot of interesting visual elements, but I don't think it hangs together as a comprehensive or cohesive piece. Because remember when I watched this in high school, so in high school when I was a little bit less critical of stuff and a little bit more, my taste wasn't as good back then, or maybe it was, I don't know. Like the music and a lot of the entertainment back then wasn't great, and I think I've matured since then. But like when I watched this back then, even I was like, some of this looked cool, but as a whole, it didn't really leave me with any feeling coming out of it.
Yeah.
So
I'm actually glad I never had finished this before I saw Devil's Rejects, because I probably wouldn't have went to the theater to see Devil's Rejects.
So if
I had seen all of this, I probably have been like, I'll wait for video. Yeah. But I was excited for Devil's Rejects based on the trailer. Yeah. Again, Rob Zombie, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go see this one.
Yeah.
And I love that film.
Yeah, going into Devil's Rejects, like I had lowered expectations because of having seen House of Thousand Corpses. After hearing it talked up and then seeing it and be disappointed, Devil's Rejects is like, oh, okay, well, he's doing something a lot different here. It's a completely different level of filmmaking. This is what maybe he intended with that first film, but didn't really accomplish. So, giving the first film a review, giving it a review score is somewhat difficult because, like, I think I have probably a slightly more favorable view of it now than I did when I watched it for the first time in like 2003 or 4, whenever that was. Just because, like, okay, some of this stuff, like having seen, rewatching Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 and a lot of stuff, it's like, okay, well, it's very heavily influenced by those, and I see that. But, as an overall movie, Well, because like Julie said, she had met Sid Haig at one of those conventions and hadn't watched any of those Rob Zombie films. And the Sid Haig was like, well, I'd recommend you watch Devil's Rejects. And that was the one he said to watch, not the other one. And I think that's true. Like, if you haven't watched any of the Rob Zombie stuff, I think Devil's Rejects is kind of the place to start.
Yeah.
Because that's the more straightforward film. House of Thousand Corpses, to me, feels more kind of like a detour that has some fun elements in it, but that doesn't really hold together that well.
Yeah.
So if I had to give this like a score out of 10, like what would you give it?
Probably like a 4. Like, not a big fan of it. You know, like, again, it has some qualities to it, but really it just does not keep me engaged when I'm watching it at all.
Yeah.
And even though I like a lot of the people involved in it, like just, you know, as people, and I like some of the performances, I would just really rather never watch this again. I watched Devil's Rejects 1,000 times over versus this. So it just, again, it doesn't have a lot of value to me, really.
Yeah. I mean, this is one that when I rewatched it, because it was on Amazon or one of those services for a while, or maybe it was on Shudder or something. Or I don't think it was, because you have Shudder, right? Like,
I don't know. I actually didn't check. I just looked for my DVD and found it.
But I looked online to try to see where to watch it, and it wasn't on any of the services that I had. So it was the same price, I think, to rent it as it was to buy it. So I bought it for like $4 on like Google Play or some service. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, I mean, I own this now. It's the same price. It was almost the same price to buy it as it was to rent it. But it's like, I don't think I'm going to go back and rewatch this again. I mean, I think I'm in the same ballpark. I think like a 4 to 5 because there's interesting elements in it and some decent performances given out of it. But as a whole, I would just recommend watching Devil's Rejects. Because to me, there's not a lot. I mean, there's like the neon lighting and some of the more stylistic elements, but a lot of the music video style editing and stuff to me just really takes away. And at least the home video footage stuff from Devil's Rejects wasn't as scattershot and inserted as much.
Yeah, it was like the beginning of it, and
so there's a lot less of that. I think it was more at the end, wasn't it?
And
yeah, so there was less of it, and I feel like Devil's Rejects kind of showed you the weight of what their atrocities were more, and made it grosser and more grimy, and the Southern rock I vastly prefer to the score from the first film. Just because the first film, the score was kind of a mishmash. You had like his version of Brick House, but then you also had like the kind of synthy stuff that came in at times, and then some of the rock stuff that came in at times, and it just kind of felt tonally like it
was all
jumped
just
around.
unfocused on almost every level. You know, as far as him directing the actors, wanting to know what he wanted out of that, stylistically, the way it's shot, the music choices, it just seemed like he really had to try to figure out his way with this film.
Yeah, so
which it makes me interested in it. Like, I watched some of the behind the scenes stuff, and I would like to watch it again with a commentary just to hear him talk about it. You know what I mean? Just have his perspective on it and some distance. But yeah, just as a film, there's so much more better things that are in this vein that even been made since then. Yeah. Or that he has even made. You know, like, I would rather watch the Halloween remake versus this. Yeah. I know I'm way lighter on that than you are. Yeah. But I would way rather watch that again than House of 1,000 Corpses. I just think he's made a lot better experiences.
Yeah, so it's a movie that's set on Halloween, and it's one of the like releases that's like a Halloween set movie that people are actually interested. We hadn't talked about yet.
But the Halloween stuff is almost, you know, he has a shot of people on Halloween on the street and say, "Oh, it's Halloween." Like, it really,
Halloween. I mean,
it's really the extent of it. Yeah, it doesn't really have a Halloween feel.
It's not like Trick or Treat where it feels through and through like Halloween. There's a lot of movies that are quote unquote set on Halloween where there's not much to it really. But yeah, so I guess that'll wrap up our discussion of House of 1,000 Corpses.
And happy Halloween, everybody.
Yeah, so enjoy your Halloween candy and or just your Halloween festivities.
And your sexy 11 costumes. Be sure to send any of those in.
I really hope too many people didn't buy those because like some of the stores defended their choice to carry them, but...
Yeah. So it was a controversy?
Yes.
I didn't even see anything about that. Yeah.
Ultimately, my thoughts on that entire situation were ick. Yeah. But yeah. So if you're listening to this, the short film Plucked that Chad directed, who's been on our podcast a few times because he's part of the site and does like a lot of the back end web development.
And is the reason it got started.
Yeah. So his short film Plucked that he wrote and directed will be coming out. So depending on when I get this out, it'll either be out or coming out soon. It's coming out on Monday the 30th. So you can check it out on our YouTube page or our Facebook page. So it's called Plucked. We're only going to give you too many story details. I think it's like before credit is like 3 minutes total, including credits and,
Yeah,
and
probably,
everything.
yeah.
So the overall short itself is about 2.5 minutes, and then there's like some credits and stuff. But it's another damn thing we shot in the woods. Mm-hmm. Not the quality of it. It's just like when you shoot in the woods, you always have to deal with ticks and cicada noise and stuff.
Yeah, challenging situations sometimes. But yeah, we shot it in like half a day or so. Pretty quick, easy shoot. It was basically just me, William, and Chad.
Yeah.
So it turned out okay considering all that. You know?
Crew of 3, because our crew on the past 2 shorts have mostly been 3 shooting it. Now there, some other people helped at different points, but like on After the Slasher, there was only 3. On Pluck, there was only 3, and 2, like the only the thing that makes me proud coming out of that was we shot it outdoors in the summer in the woods with cicada noise, and like there's kids in this lake next to, or this little lake swimming next to us, or is it a lake? I mean, it's pretty small. It's like
man-made lake. Yeah, it's a man-made lake.
And we got all on-set audio and for the dialogue, and didn't have to do any ADR, which we haven't really done much ADR, and I really hate ADR, so I'm glad we didn't have to. And yeah, like I said, so if you watch that, realize the crew was 3, and we've thought about like doing like features, like maybe we do need more than 3 people.
We absolutely do, yeah.
Because that short, 2.5 minute short, we shot in one day.
Well, I basically too like did not hardly use a reflector a little bit, but it was challenging lighting situations with the sun changing. Like, you would put up a silk screen. Like, there's a lot of things we would have done different if it was actually a big project. But being a half-day thing with a small crew, it's like we just roll with it and do the best we can with the resources we have.
I think, too, watching it, you'd be hard-pressed to really tell most of those things.
Yeah.
Because I've been watching a number of horror shorts lately, and the biggest sin of a lot of them is people just don't light things properly, expose it, so everything's too dark. I mean, so... This one is, set in the woods, and it's called Plucked, and you can just check it out and let us know what you think. Because it'll
be on our Facebook and YouTube, right?
Yeah, Facebook and YouTube, and you can also check it out at housebyvideostore.com. There are links there to all of our social media accounts, to YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. All those you can find at the website. You can also leave us a review on iTunes if that's how you're listening to the podcast. We also always enjoy seeing comments on YouTube if you're reviewing there, so we always enjoy any feedback. And then if you want to find us on the internet specifically, make sure you follow our Instagram account, HBTVS_official. And like on social media, I don't really use my Twitter anymore. I know I mentioned it before, and I think I'm in the process of transitioning over to my other Twitter account that's just my actual name, like @WilliamCaps. But just make sure you follow our Instagram account and our Facebook account if you want to see updates on things. And then, like I said, I changed like my Instagram. Like it's mostly just pictures of like me, and since I've been dating Julie, there's a lot of pictures of us, and then like just random stuff I've seen. So there's really not much film related on there to recommend it. But like I'd recommend you check out the official House by the Video Store account. And like I said, my Twitter. Maybe if I get the other one up and going, I'll pimp that one out.
If I meant to say too, I meant to talk to you about this, but if people want to send us their Halloween costumes when they were a kid.
Yeah,
that would be a cool thing to put them on Facebook on Halloween.
Yeah,
I was going to look up my own. A lot of people have all their stuff from their kids. Like I think I have some in my basement because I have some of my parents' photos right now. But throw us some pictures. Even we'll just put them on social media or retweet them or something like that. If you have some good, funny, or just your costumes of you as a kid or now too, if you're doing anything great, send them our way.
Yeah, because I think as a kid, I think I was Batman a bunch. Batman a number of times actually. I think I was like maybe a Ninja Turtle or something with like those costumes you got from Walgreens.
Yeah. I know I was Jason a couple times. At one point I was Jason and Freddy. I had the glove and Jason mask. And like I said, Frankenstein. I think that was in first grade maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have pictures of that, but I remember being Frankenstein then. So happy Halloween.
Yep.
So we're going to have another short out as we have every year for October, which you just had After the Slasher out as well.
Yeah, so you've had 2 shorts come out in Halloween. We had 2 last year and 2 this year during the month of October.
Yeah.
So you can check those out. So that'll wrap up this episode of the House by Video Store podcast. Thanks for listening.